Ladies and gentlemen, it seems like Collingwood have doubled down on securing Bailey Humphrey from the Gold Coast Suns. It's time to talk all things black and white. Okay, so this is all starting to make sense. The conversations around how, although Bobby wants to remain at the Pies, the board and list management aren't sold on the idea of keeping or being able to keep Bobby for the long term and quietly going about putting his name on the trade table. Those are the whispers we've heard. And then we hear we're having meetings with Bailey Humphrey yesterday. And then we get another tweet from Xander today saying Collingwood believe it has sold the best future to the 21-year-old under McRae. They all think they can get it done. So Carlton and Melbourne are all part of this conversation as well, which is worth its consideration. I think, ladies and gents, for this trade to be facilitated, if Bailey wants to come home to the biggest club in Australia, we're going to have to trade Bobby Hill. And where do we start with that? Because Gold Coast aren't going to want picks. They don't value picks because they have access to their academy, at least for this year, right? Before further changes to the bidding system. So they're going to want players. So I think this is going to need a three-way trade, okay? And we got trades from previous years to refer to for similar players that are in the same bracket as Bobby Hill's quality and ability. Say hypothetically we trade Bobby Hill to the West Coast Eagles, okay? Let's first get a grasp on what his value could be on the market. And I think he's still at the highest value, despite missing a few months this season. Let's have a look at what we gave up for Lockie Schultz. We gave up a future first, and that's a mid-second rounder, pick 34, for Lockie Schultz, okay? I would argue that Bobby Hill is a class above Lockie Schultz. So then we look at, okay, what did Fremantle give up for Shai Bolton? 10, 11, 18 went to Richmond for pick 14 and Shai Bolton. So, to me, if we break that down, Bolton made way to the Dockers by way of pick 10 and pick 18 is my assumption. So that's 2 first-round picks. What that means, can Collingwood justify to West Coast, who have an abundance of picks, who would be willing to give them up because of how many they have? I'll double check how much they have, bear with me. But they have picks, they have compensation because of Oscar Allen. They're getting compensation from the AFL, like what's the word? What's the word when they've... Anyways, they're seeking some West Coast compensation. Let's search it up, what that means. They're getting granted an assistance package, okay? So West Coast draft picks 2025. So West Coast at this point in time have 1, 15, 19, 20, 34, 52, okay? So what I'm thinking is, to some level, I'll put this back on the screen. You send Bobby Hill to West Coast, and it's probably going to warrant a three-way trade. Is there a player from West Coast that Gold Coast would entertain? And then would they take a pick, and then could they use that pick to send it another way to get another player? Say Petrarca, right? Because Petrarca has nominated Gold Coast. And Gold Coast, I mean, they have picks, but they're going to have academy picks to spend on as well. So while they don't value them much, they're still going to need to reserve some of it. And they're going to need to get Petrarca, who could very well be worth 2 first-round draft picks. And I think that's something they'd be willing to do. So then you give them more picks by way of West Coast to assist them with the Christian Petrarca trade. So maybe then they don't need a player in that three-way trade. Maybe they do need the picks so they can then go get their man in Petrarca and whoever else may be on the market. I don't know all the ins and outs, but that's what could make sense. And I know it's a sensitive subject because Bobby Hill, we love him. He's Norm Smith. He's a premiership player. He's overcome adversities. We've worked with him and through him with everything. So I understand that. But at the end of the day, this is a business. This makes our team younger. Bailey Humphrey is going to be a superstar. You saw what he did in that final series. He's 21. He's from Victoria. He wants to play for a big club. We don't have access to picks right now. So that ultimately means our only trade bait at this point in time is Bobby Hill. There's no Bo McCreary in the conversation. There's no Jordan De Goey in the conversation. There's no Isaac Quaynor in the conversation as of yet. But you can definitely, if you can't smell now, or if you can't see where there's a smoke, there's usually a fire. You put 2 and 2 together with all these leaks happening over the last week, it's finally starting to make sense. I am curious to hear what you guys think in the comment section. Is Bailey Humphrey an upgrade from Bobby Hill? I think so. I think his versatility. And some of you might say you might not get the picks you want from Bobby because Bobby is not in the same bracket of Shai Bolton, who can also play midfield. But like I said, it's the situation that presents where West Coast have an abundance of picks. Petrarca needs to get to Gold Coast. So clubs will be willing to let go of these first round draft picks because of the abundance they have and the need they have for other players and to get Bobby back home to Western Australia. We heard John Ralph say that Bobby Hill couldn't promise that if things change with his family situation in the near future, he can't guarantee that he's not going to move to Western Australia. So as a club, are you willing to run the risk of keeping Bobby on the list for another year where he might go unsighted again and go MIA, which would be the absolute worst case scenario. But I'm more thinking towards what if at the end of the year, next year, he requests a trade. I would personally prefer to offer him in a trade this off-season, given what we've heard from John Ralph, because he's at his highest value. We don't know what happens next year. Does he fall off? Does he, knock on wood, get injured? These are the things that must be considered, and the club will do their due diligence. And where we all thought it wasn't possible to secure a big fish, here we are potentially working with 2 first-round draft picks, whether it be pick 15 and pick 19 from West Coast. Send that to Gold Coast. Bobby goes to West Coast. Petrarca get their man in... Gold Coast get their man in Petrarca. And they have their picks available for the academy. So it's quite convoluted, but I think that makes enough sense for the time being. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, go Pies.